Let's have a good overview now of all of the key players in the vocational education and training system here in Australia. So I'm going to start with the National Centre for Vocational Education and Research, NCVER. And let's just appreciate that we're going to come full circle back to them at the end, all right? So this starts as a data collection point. There's a lot of scientific data that gets collected, a lot of surveys, a lot of statistics about how many people are starting to enrol in courses and how many are actually finishing and how many are quitting. So these types of data is then fed through to the National Skills Standard Council, NSSC, and I'm just actually showing you on the right-hand side of the screen just a quick little snap view of each of these websites. So you can actually trace back through, just Google search them if you like, if you wanted some bigger information. This is just to give you an overall who's who in VET and how you as a trainer and an assessor fit into that. Now the NSSC develops law around training and assessing here in Australia. So you can see here that the current law is the Standards for Registered Training Organisations 2015. And you can access that at the ComLaw site, which is an Australian government site, and download it. And we actually are going to be referring to that law quite a lot throughout our course here. So just moving down now. One of the other governing bodies is the Australian Qualifications Framework, AQF. And I will just take a moment to go into a page of their website. So they create the policies around which type of training institutions, like registered training organisations in the vocational system, in the VET area, or what qualifies as a high school. You know, there's private schools, there's public high schools. So, you know, and also what qualifies as a university. So what actual organisations can be issuing qualifications. And you can see that the AQF covers everything from a senior secondary certificate of education, then you're moving from the school section into the vocational training section from your certificate 1 through to, you know, possibly your advanced diploma, and then there's a bit of an overlap between diplomas all the way through to a doctoral degree, which is handled in the higher education sector or universities. So you can see in the middle, that's all of the type of qualifications in VET. So as you're doing this course, you might be doing your Certificate 4 in Training and Assessment to enhance your skills as a presenter, as a trainer, and you might only be delivering in-house training for your workplace, okay? And there's no Certificate 1 or Certificate 4, you know, nationally recognised training that's being offered, okay? And that's perfectly fine to do the course for that reason, but for us to be able to here at Evoke issue you with a Certificate 4 in Training and Assessment, we must ensure that you could walk out of your training with your qualification and be able to deliver nationally recognised training. So this course will assume that you would at some point in the future be looking at doing that or be able to do that, okay? So even if some of this doesn't seem relevant to you right now and you may not intend to work for a registered training organisation, to qualify for a Certificate 4, we need demonstrations of your knowledge and skill to be able to deliver nationally recognised training, okay? So that's the Australian Qualifications Framework, and your registered training organisation would have to fully understand all of the policies around issuing the certificates for, you know, the full qualification or the statements of attainment. Okay, so moving on, we then have ASQA. So once that law has been created and you know, we have the policies there around issuing the qualifications. We have the Australian Skills Quality Authority, or ASQA, and they're the regulatory body for registered training organisations. So this is a government body that makes sure that the registered training organisation is complying with the law, okay? So they will conduct audits of your registered training organisation, and sometimes as a trainer and assessor you might be involved in that audit process. You might be invited to come along and participate in that. So that's something that you and your RTO have to negotiate and work out there. You certainly have to follow all of your registered training organisations' policies and procedures because they're driven by the legislation. And those policies must be followed because ASQA will come along and audit your RTO and make sure that you trainers and assessors are following the legislative compliant types of processes, okay? So all of these forms you're going to see throughout the course, I mean, some people I hear, you know, when I say what Evoke trains in, they roll their eyes and go, oh, I remember doing that course, there was so many documents and forms that have to be signed and worked through as a trainer and assessor. Well, that's to be able to prove that the legislation's being followed. So that's up to your registered training organisation, whether they want to flood you in paperwork or how they're going to manage that process. But the buck stops with them, and they can actually lose their registration to be a training organisation and cease to be able to take enrolments and shut down as a business. So, you know, it's in your interest to follow all of the procedures because, you know, you want to be able to remain employed into the future there. So moving on from ASQA, which you'll hear me talk about a lot, ASQA, that's really the level that starts to hit home with the RTOs and new trainers and assessors. Then we move into training.gov.au. And you can see that the page, you might have an earlier page in some of the other modules. This is the latest page for it. So it's called training.gov.au, but they're putting that face on it with the skills. So if you want to go directly into training.gov.au to actually access the training packages, you come down to this right-hand side and click and come back to this page that you'll become more familiar with as you work through the course. This is actually where trainers and assessors and the registered training organisations can enter the course codes to access the training packages. So you can see here your Certificate 4 in Training and Assessment, for example. You can download in a Word document or a PDF document the whole training package for that, and we'll actually get to that at some stage later on.